Okay, let's make an attempt to now graph some exponential functions. Let's start off with the one that we began with, 2 to the x, and let's actually plot or draw the graph. So let's start off with our x values. Here's 2 to the x, and I'm going to plug in some values that we've already seen, like 0, 1, 2, and 3. We already saw if you plug in 0, you get 1. Plug in 1, you get 2. Plug in 2, you get 4. Plug in 3, you get 8. The question is, what do you get when you plug in something like -1 or -2? So let's do 2 raised to the -2. Well, what you need to realize is that that's the same as 1 over 2 squared. And that's using this property of exponents, that x to the negative n is equal to 1 over x to the positive n. So we have x to the negative n is 1 over x to the positive n. And that's just 1/4. Now if we do 2 to the -1, we get 1 over 2 to the first power, which is just 1/2. Okay, now with these points, let's go ahead and plot these. So these are like ordered pairs. Here's my x and y axis. At 0, I'm up at 1. At 1, I'm up at 2. At 2, I'm up at 4. At 3, I'm up at 8. So 5, 6, 7, here's 8. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm up here at 8 now. And then at -1, I'm at 1/2. At -2, I'm at 1/4. And you can imagine that if I did -3, I'd be 1 over 2 cubed, that would be 1/8. So what's happening is as I move in the negative direction for x values, my y values get smaller and smaller and smaller, but they never actually hit the x-axis. So it's going to go like this, and I'll just draw a little arrow. I'll put a dotted line to make it represent like it's a horizontal asymptote. It's getting closer and closer to 0. And then as I go this way, it grows and grows and grows and gets larger and larger and larger. So this is the graph of the exponential function 2 raised to the x. Okay, let's do another example. This time, I'm going to do, let's say, 1/2 raised to the x. Okay, so for this one, what I want you to realize is that if you have a fraction as your base, what you can do is you can flip your fraction over, make it 2 over 1, but then you change the exponent to a negative. And that comes off of a property of exponents that says if you have a fraction raised to a negative exponent, you can flip it and make it a positive exponent. We're actually going the other way around. We're starting with the positive exponent of x, and then we're flipping the fraction and making it negative. Now, the reason we do this is because now we can look at our function as being 2, that's 2 over 1, to the negative x. Now, there's several ways you can do this. You can do a table and put in some values like -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Or you can just use the fact that we did transformations and reflections, and anytime you put a negative here in front of the x, that's going to give you a reflection over the y-axis. I'm actually going to plug in the points though. 2 to the negative x. So if I plug in -2 right here, it becomes negative, that's positive. So this is going to be 2 to the, 2 to the second, 2, positive 2, that's 4. Now if I plug in -1, -1 just gives me 1, so that's 2. If I plug in 0, 2 to the 0 is just going to be 1. Now if I plug in 1, it's going to be -1, so it's 2 to the -1, which gives me 1/2. Remember, changing the exponent to positive, okay? And then lastly, if we plug in 2, 2 to the -2 is actually 1 over 2 squared, which is 1/4. Okay, now if we graph this, what you're going to see is that at -2, we're up here at 1, 2, 3, 4. At -1, we're at 2. At 0, we're at 1. At 1, we're at 1/2. And at 2, we're at 1/4. So what's happening is it's growing this direction now. And as we move from left to right, it's getting closer and closer to the x-axis, and we have a horizontal asymptote. So you can see that what happened is it's kind of like our other graph, but it's flipped over the y-axis. Okay, let's do one last example here. Let's do an exponential function that has a very strange base. So let's do something like 0.3 to the x. Okay, to do 0.3 to the x, I'm going to go ahead and create a table. So here's x, here's 0.3 to the x. I'm going to pick -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Those are the numbers I usually like to pick. Then I'm going to grab my calculator. And what I'm going to do first is 0.3 raised to the -2. So on your calculator, you need to figure out how to do this. And you'll get something like 11.1. Here I do 0.3 to the -1, okay? Every calculator is different, so I recommend that you go online, look up your calculator, try and get some help that way. Okay, now 0.3 to the 0, of course, any number other than 0 raised to 0 is 1. 0.3 to the 1 is just itself, 0.3. And then, of course, 0.3 squared should give you 0.09. So 0.3 squared is 0.09. So if I graph these, at -2, I'm up at 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'm at like 11.1, so I'm up here. At -1, I'm at 3.3, 1, 2, 3.3. At 0, I'm at 1. At 1, I'm at 0.3, so like here. At 2, I'm at 0.09. It's way real close to the x-axis. But you can see now, it's going to go like this and get closer and closer to the x-axis again. So I'm going to give you a little summary, kind of what to expect. If you're graphing an exponential function that looks like this, a to the x, okay, and this number in here is bigger than 1, then your graph is going to look like this. It's going to go up like that, closer and closer to the x-axis on the left. It will always cross through the point 0, 1, and it will go up as you move to the right. Now, if you have a graph something like this, or an exponential function something like this, a to the x, and this time your number a is less than 1, that means it's like a fraction, and remember, it always has to be greater than 0, what's going to happen is this picture is going to be kind of flipped over. So you're going to go like this now. It'll always cross through 0, 1, but it'll go up on the left. Now, what happens if we were to change this to a negative sign, right? If we change this to a negative sign, remember what happens is it flips our graph over the y-axis. So it'd look like this, which is kind of like that one, isn't it? And if we change this one to a negative, it'll flip this one over and it'll go the other way. Now remember, the difference between these two is that for this one, the base is a number bigger than 1, and for this one, the base is a number between 0 and 1. So that gives you just kind of a summary of how to graph exponential functions.